So one of the big questions I get asked about a lot by farmers is the whole carbon story and what it means in terms of emission accounting and all the numbers that's involved. So to make it very simple, essentially the role of emission accounting is just to demonstrate your sustainability credentials, to say that you're doing a good job, that what you're putting on is actually being reflected in how much you're taking off the paddock. In terms of how we do this, it's exactly the same set of numbers that we would need if we were doing any profit or loss accounting in terms of what's going into the paddock and what's going out. This is something that farmers really don't need to be worried about because Australian farmers on the whole are already among the most emission efficient in the world. So it's more around telling our good story than it is around feeling like you might be penalised for what you're doing. The key thing about emission accounting when it comes to supply chain reportability is that it's around quantifying the energy required to grow that crop and then how it moves through the supply chain. How we do this is what's called emission intensity reporting. So for the inputs that you put into that crop, what's the outputs from that? So if you have a lot of inputs but not much outputs, your emission intensities are going to be really high per tonne of product that you're taking out. If you have this much inputs, but you spread those across very high tonnage, then the emission intensity in what we call kilograms of CO2 equivalents per tonne will actually be really low because you've spread that across more tonnes. So the key message around emission accounting is it's all around efficiency. So when we talk about emission efficiency, we're really talking about how we can get the most bang for buck for the inputs that we're putting into the system. So knowing that nitrogen manufacture and usage on farm is our single biggest emission bucket in cropping, it makes sense to make sure that we're using that nitrogen as efficiently as we can. And of course, one of the key ways we can do that is by having pulse crops or legumes in the system, so we're reducing our inputs of nitrogen. The next part from that is to set that paddock up well so that those plants can make best use of the nitrogen that you're putting into the system, which means that your emission intensities and your efficiency is going to be optimised for that. One of the key challenges we have in ag is our ability to capture and report what we're doing. And one of the key reasons why we have challenges in the emission accounting space is as an industry, we're not great at reporting that kind of thing. So the first message that I'd give any farmer who's looking at starting to calculate their emissions on farm or has been asked by one of their supply chain partners or their bank to do any of that work is actually to check out that they've got their data sets in order so they can choose to participate in something if they wish. In terms of how we move forward into the space of emission accounting, knowing that every food and beverage company and actually every company in the economy will over time be asked to do that reporting as part of their financial disclosures means that the requirement for emission reporting will only increase over time. So it's a really nice way to think of it, not as an impost, but as something that you can do to demonstrate that you're doing well and to be able to provide that evidence to those who need it. The key thing though is to ensure that whoever is using that information is doing so with your best interest at heart.